prophecy is how they enslave us! You are not prepared for what is to come.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Dune Part 2 review, a movie 3 years in the waiting and making. We both saw it at the special preview on February 25th, the IMAX preview, one of, I think, the first movie I've seen in IMAX before, which helps this movie a lot. Well, first, how did you feel about the first film? And then, I forget how you felt about it, and then the second one.
Yeah, I've seen the first film 4 times. I remember the first time coming out of it, I think I was so, overwhelmed with the scope of the film. And on second and third viewing, by third viewing, I really did get into the film. I really liked what it was saying, and what it was starting to say about chosen one narratives, and the manipulations to see things as we want them. I thought that was all really compelling at a grand scale that we love out of great science fiction storytelling. So I was ready. This was one of my top 3 anticipated films of the year. And I think what I was most impressed with is that I think Denis Villeneuve and company really captured, I think, the hardest emotion to depict on screen, which is betrayal. I think betrayal is such a hard thing to grasp in a narrative story because it requires separation between the characters and the audience. You know, it's very easy, and that's why a lot of filmmakers fall into this cliche to get you to like a character who shares the same values as you. You know, that's easy filmmaking. And what I found so commendable about this film is that he takes what he's earned from the first part and literally makes you challenge every single character, every single belief and belief system that they share. And that is really difficult. It's increasingly difficult to do it in blockbuster filmmaking when you have to please a certain number of people in order to get the movie made at the budget that it needs to be successful. And so I just thought this film was supported by such dramatic intelligence from everybody across the board to be able to convey this arc. We won't say what the arc is. This is a spoiler-free review, but I truly feel that when betrayal is reflected back to a movie-going audience, you get one of the most purest depictions of authentic humanity on film. And I think that's why, to me, Dune Part 2 is just such a masterwork.
Dune Part 2, yeah, I think is even better than the first one in pretty much every aspect. The first one was kind of like a slow burn leading up, I think, to this moment. And this one really picks up right where the first one left off and just like delves into every aspect even more, like the religious fanaticism, the prophecy, the politics, all of that stuff, I think is more fleshed out and developed. And I think Denis is saying more in this film than he was saying in the first one. The first one was, I love the movie, I think a lot more setup, and I think this is a lot more payoff. The performances, I think pretty much on every level, leveled up. Timothée Chalamet, I think, has a arc in this film that would be very hard for any actor to do. We don't want to spoil the arc because there are people who haven't read the book, but it's a hard thing to do in even this runtime, a close to 3-hour runtime. That's a hard arc to go on as an actor and make it believable. And I think he, with what he has given, pretty much nails it. And Zendaya, in my opinion, was probably my favorite performance. I think she is, if you connect to any character in this film, you connect to Zendaya. She's kind of like the heart of the film, because she's kind of the eyes as you watch Paul Atreides on this arc, and you're there with
No, I agree. I think Zendaya is the audience surrogate, and I think she takes a character whose agency could have been very easily stripped away from her and gave that character a lot of dignity throughout. I think that Timothée Chalamet and Zendaya, their chemistry, their relationship really is the heart and soul of the film. And I was really impressed with how much I was invested in without spoilers, just the ebbs and flows of their relationship and how it reflects the rest of their cultures. I agree. I think this is Timothée Chalamet's best work since Call Me by Your Name. I think he is able to take human fragility and convey it in a way. This movie is very much about the distinction between aggression and preservation, and how people like validate their behavior because it's towards a greater good. And all of this is just supported by just such impeccable craft. I mean, Greg Fraser, there were
It's
shots in
stunning.
here that just made my heart thump like one of those, sandworm collars.
But yep. Mm-hmm.
I think this is Hans Zimmer. I mean, Dune overall, it's his Star Wars. It's his defining compositional work. Just everything about it. It's odd for me. It feels silly to reduce this to comparison, but I really, if there was going to be a comparison, I've seen people throw out David Lean. I think that's very apt. Personally, due to Villeneuve's, I don't want to say it's cold, but he does not make you like the characters. He lets them stand on their own. He's not trying to sand off their edges while portraying them in this vast world. To me, this is Stanley Kubrick's Lord of the Rings. That's how I have been describing it to people. With the same level of morality that is discussed in that director's work is here. I mean, do you have a favorite scene? To me, like
it's so hard to pick. I think the opening scene really set the mood. There's something about the color grading of the sand and like I don't know, the way that whole scene played out just really was like, whoa.
I've never seen orange on film look like that.
It looked so good. I kind of wish, because it kind of loses that a little bit throughout. The sand becomes maybe a little less orange. But yeah, that really set the tone. I mean, him riding the sandworm, which you see in the trailers, is an incredible scene. And the fight scene, which you also see in the trailers, between him and Austin Butler was, I don't know how that had me on the edge of my seat. I was gasping because I haven't read the books. I don't know what's going to happen. So I really thought anything could happen in that scene. They take you on a journey throughout what happens in that fight and what you think could happen. So that was probably the most intense scene throughout the whole film.
When Timmy rides a sandworm for the first time, there's this shot where the sandworm comes in, and I literally felt my body seize up because I felt like I was in danger. Like the way these sequences are staged and framed, the sound design, just everything about it. It feels like this is beyond like a critical conversation. I think it's just, this is how cinema should be, and it's depicting who we are. It's actually depicting human interactions. It's using genre very similarly to Oppenheimer, I feel, to lull the audience in, using certain genre tropes to get them to think deeper and motivate them forward. Just everything about this, I just thought it was, I mean, the costume design, I mean, we can talk about, this movie could be talked about forever. Just, whatever your expectations are, it meets it and then some.
Yep, for sure. And I don't think it's flawless. Like, I do think we as a, I don't know, like film society use the word masterpiece too much. I think it's thrown around for like every movie. I wouldn't quite say this is a masterpiece. I think it's still one of the probably best sci-fi films I've seen. But I do still have some issues with it. Like, I think the third act is where most of my issues lie. I think there is, I don't want to spoil anything, but there is a switch that happens in Timmy's character, which it makes sense given what happens for it to be kind of sudden. But I don't know, something about it didn't come once he gets into that second half, after he drinks something is all I'll say. It becomes believable, but it just took a second that it felt like it was maybe a little too jarring. And then in the third act, there were some developments that I think felt maybe a little rushed.
My retort to that would be, yes, those moments do kind of shock us still. And because the thing about it is that both of us we had a general idea of where the story was going, I think, going in. But then when it happens, we were like, oh my God. And I think it's because Timothée Chalamet is such a good actor that it's hard for you to get on board completely with where the story ends up. Like, you're rooting for him, as I think the safest way I can say. I think that's why, because there's a moment at the end when he's confronted with a certain character, not Austin Butler, and I could feel myself like rooting for Timmy, and then I was like, oh my God, that's awful that I just thought that in this moment that's what I want him to do. I think it really is a masterful performance. There's masterpiece. But I don't know, because
not masterpiece.
Yeah, I think it's, listen, I think if I think we're very lucky right now. I'm actually this is what I'm writing my college thesis on. I really think we're
Oh.
entering a new Hollywood. I think that the 60s with the big budget musicals and then that leading to, their crash and leading to the 1970s new Hollywood with The Godfather and, Spielberg and
Yeah.
Cabaret. I think we're seeing the same thing happening, but instead of the 60s musical, it's the 2010 superhero
Mhm.
epic. And we are in this new era where I think you have people like, Yorgos Lanthimos, Greta Gerwig, Denis Villeneuve, Christopher Nolan. We're really in, I think, one of the greatest periods of film that understands and is moving forward the theatrical experience, what a theater can actually provide to a story. So,
Mhm.
frankly, I think we're just lucky to be alive during this time.
Yeah.
for movies.
Yeah. Austin Butler, I think, is very good in this movie. I honestly wanted more scenes with him. He just has this pretty terrifying aura and screen presence about him. I've seen some people or heard some people talk to some people who thought he was kind of overdoing it a little bit, which I don't think he did. I think he struck the perfect balance in his performance. And I don't know if he's the main villain. He kind of is the main antagonist. He doesn't show up for a little while. So I don't know
Yeah.
if there's one main guy, but there's one scene where he walks in a area with his cape and stuff, and it just felt like Darth Vader walking into a scene in the Star Wars movies. So he has this presence about him that I think is very powerful. I wanted more of him, but he does great with what he's given, I think.
And even though she's a kind of a tease for the next one, I do think I really liked Florence Pugh's presence here as
Hmm.
well. I thought she represented um, an interesting commentary on the Bene Gesserit overall within this universe, and I just find that to be one of the most fascinating elements of this story, especially given that a lot of it is this dichotomy between church and state. That's kind of what
Hmm.
Dune attempts and pulls off
Yeah.
quite well, is that dichotomy and that relationship. So yeah, I mean, I think, listen, this is probably not surprising that the two of us love Dune Part Two.
Yeah.
I do think that it is. I the more I see it, I think it's going to be hard for another movie to come close to this one this year.
It's also Javier Bardem. I think he brings the most like comedic relief to the film per se. I thought
Very
he
difficult.
he
Yeah.
yeah, he strikes because it could come off as like cheesy in moments like where everything that Paul does, pretty much every moment, anything he does, Javier Bardem just has this look like I forget what it's called, like Lisan Al Gaib, right?
Yeah, yeah.
He's like he's the chosen one, like for even the like most little of things, and sometimes it plays off comedic, but it still feels very like realistic, like this is how the character would react to it, and he's not played off as a joke,
He
which
could have
wouldn't.
so easily been the butt of a joke, and we could have
Mhm.
been mocking that character, but he gives him enough human interest to make you believe that this character would have those reactions and also be the necessary, and the last one I feel like Oscar Isaac was that sort of levity that we needed, and
Yeah.
that's why when he leaves the film, you really get the sense, oh, shit's getting dark here.
Yeah.
And so he's used very well, and I think Javier Bardem and Josh Brolin are used just as well here to fill that void. Yeah, I just think that in the end, we talked about every technical crafts person is at the top of their game here. Greg
It's
Fraser,
amazing.
Hans Zimmer. It's true. It's not only impressive and impeccable craft, it's craft that I think is advancing the form. And I do think
Mhm.
we're living through a very unique period in film where I think it's almost, you know, we see this a lot of times in politics where certain administrations will show us how fragile democracy is or certain things, and it gets us only to care about the institutions even more. I think with streaming, we saw people really start to question, will the movie theater experience survive? And because of that, because of the pandemic, it only reinforced how important that is. And that's why I think we're in a really unique era with people like Denis Villeneuve, Christopher Nolan, Greta Gerwig, James Cameron, even actors like Tom Cruise, who are major
Mhm.
forces behind the camera. They show why this art form in this medium matters, and that's why I think Dune is so important, because not only is it
Mhm.
telling such a bold story that most people wouldn't even attempt, let alone at this scale. The fact that it pulls it off, it's doing things that we've never seen, heard, felt before in a theater, and it's reinforcing why movies matter. I don't think we could ask for
Mhm.
more, and that's why it's such a special
No.
film.
No. No, and it's honestly hard to even talk about the technical aspects and go into detail. They're just as good, probably even better than the first one. Everyone is at the top of their game, at the top of like what film can even do today. Everyone is like at the top level. Like I can't even imagine anything exceeding this. It's just it's the highest form from everyone, and it's just like you said, it's the reason why we should see movies on the big screen. Yeah, Denis Villeneuve is the Lisan Al-Gaib of cinema and sci-fi. He's the chosen one because what he does is just incredible. So please see it on the biggest screen. And yeah,
Do we need to talk about the Oscar prospects?
I think we can quickly touch on. I think
a lot of
direct-
nominations.
Yeah,
Probably
pretty much everything the first one got, I think it will get. I think the big question when you talk about Oscar prospects is director. Because he didn't get in for the first one. It makes me question if he would for the second. I do think the second one is a bigger achievement than the first one, to be honest. And I do also worry about wins in the technical categories.
But I do think what might have hurt him the first time is how many people did actually see that film in theaters. You know, with
That's
the
true.
HBO Max rollout, I think that has something to do with it. What would have Avatar had done if people didn't go to the theater to see it? So I think because more people are going to be seeing this in theaters, I think the Oppenheimer effect of 70 millimeter IMAX is going to help him. The release date is earlier, so that might hurt him. I think in the end,
it's going to be a weak year, though, I think.
The weak year might help all the categories, and I think will come down to what is the movement on Dune Messiah. If this isn't the final chapter, then I think they're going to wait. But I do think we're getting closer to a Lord of the Rings type moment, potentially, for Dune Messiah, because I just think people are really understanding what the value that this has to the movie culture.
Yeah, I think one of the things I said when I first came out of seeing it, it is, I think, a once in a generation kind of epic thing. I don't think we've seen a film series like this since Lord of the Rings, to be honest. And I think it's deserving of, I think that honor that they give Return of the King, whatever the last installment of this is, should and probably will get that honor. They're already talking about doing Messiah, so I do worry about them potentially not doing it for this one. And I do also worry about wins. I think he'll get all the same tech noms, but win-wise, I think because some people may be like, well, we've already seen a lot of the same stuff and rewarded it in the previous one, they might not give it to this.
Yeah,
but it depends on what the competition is.
Listen, this is either going to be a Two Towers or a Dark Knight. You know, Dark Knight obviously improved upon the Oscar pedigree of the first film, where Two Towers did a little bit less than Fellowship of the Ring, but still got nominated for Best Picture. So, you know, I think that's what we're looking at. But it's good company to be in it. If you're somewhere between the Dark Knight and the Two Towers, I wouldn't be complaining.
You're doing good. You're doing good.
Good.
You're doing good. Exactly. More Dune puns coming, I'm sure, because they're a long year ahead. So I think, it will all depend on the competition, which right now I don't think there's going to be a ton of other epics. So we'll have to see as the year plays out. Once again, it is only February, almost March. So it's early for Oscar stuff. But that's what we think right now. That's what we think about the movie overall. We both loved it. We already talked about some of the flaws and stuff. There are some flaws within it, but I think they're very minuscule when you compare it to the epicness and how I personally don't think even with the first one, seen anything quite like this. It was truly jaw-dropping and exhilarating. So, yeah. Anything else?
Right. Long live the fighters.
Long live the fighters. And go see it, people. Go see it. Get it to a Dune $1 billion, which it won't, but in our dreams.
Hey, okay. I didn't think Barbie was going to get $1 billion, and look where we are now.
That's true.
Top Gun Maverick, you know, the highest grossing movies of the last couple of years, I don't think anybody anticipated them being as big as they were. So you never know.
We can hope.
So even Avatar, nobody thought Avatar could do it again, and look what it did.
It did, and it'll do it a third time next year. So yes, thank you all for watching. By the time this comes out, I'm sure some of you have seen it in like Thursday, Friday screenings. So comment your thoughts on the film down below. Oscar prospects.
No spoilers. Please be careful.
No spoilers. Yeah, please be careful. If you are going to spoil stuff, please at least put a little marker there that people can look away if they have not. Because I went in not knowing the story, and I think that greatly improved it for me. So yes, thank you all for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.
Bye, everyone.